Okay. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Media Musings. Currently in the chat we have Critical Cripple. And so hello to Critical Cripple and of course anyone who is lurking or maybe watching in the future. And I do have a redaction to make about the last episode, the one on Dr. Faustus. Oh, and since Santi is here, I will go ahead and make it.
Cool.
So yesterday or last week, not yet.
Yesterday.
Previous to us going live right now.
Yeah, yes. So last week, during the Faustus stream, not last week, the week before last, on the last installment, previously on
the
Media
last
Musings.
episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Previously on Media Musings.
Santi asked me if what Faustus would be in D&D terms. And I, without hesitation, said Fiend Pack Warlock. The thing is, like, thematically, that's what he should be. And this is a little tease to the next, Dungeons and Divinity, because everyone voted for the non-Bible character. Mechanically speaking, Faustus, as portrayed in Dr. Faustus by Christopher Marlowe, cannot be a Pact of the Fiend Warlock. He'd be a Pact of the Archfey Warlock. Because
I'm not going to argue with you because I don't have a clue what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Minor difference.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, to do that bit with dicking around with the Pope, he'd have to.
Is it euphemism?
No.
No.
He'd have to be able to cast greater invisibility, which Fiend Warlocks don't get, but Fey Warlocks do.
Ah.
And
So
he has to have a ton of levels in Warlock to be able to do the hay bale thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, because that would be casting true polymorph. And it seems like Jen is allergic to pedantic spell talk.
I'm just tired of being sick.
Yeah.
And it's not even it's not even COVID. I don't even get the allocates for surviving COVID like Trump did. I just have a cold for 2 weeks.
Oh, of course. Yeah, COVID's easy to survive if you have the best...
Lots of money.
If you have the best
doctors.
Yeah, if you have the best government-funded healthcare money can buy.
Pretty much. But he's the strongest, there's never been anyone stronger, and
currently we have also have Sammy Jenkins in the chat. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Sammy.
And also Santi, your question about running Dr. Faustus as a one-shot. Honestly, I don't think it'd make a very good one-shot. Like, the entire plot of the play is just Faustus doing Faustus things. So while it's a good character concept to build a D&D character off of, it doesn't really have anything worth playing through.
Fair. Yeah, it's not really a plot-driven story, is
Yeah.
it? It's very character-driven.
Yeah.
You can have character-driven role-playing sessions, though.
But it's not plot-heavy
would
at
get
all.
boring.
There's very little plot there.
It would get really boring, yes.
Yeah, and you would have to rely, and with only having the one, possibly two protagonists, you haven't got enough for a full party.
It'd make a good video game.
Yeah. Now I'm imagining
You have to
playing a game and like press X to dig
Yeah.
the Pope.
To dig the Pope, yeah. I can feel the Holy Spirit. That's not the Holy Spirit. That's Faustus.
Yeah, I guess it's like try like that like I guess that could be an angle, but yeah, it doesn't really sound like an engaging story to play out.
What we need is someone to create a game where the party is a lawful good paladin, a chaotic evil character, and then a pure neutral character in the middle, and just this party, and let's see what they do.
Yeah.
The evil character kills everybody else and steals their money.
Yeah. No. See what we need is lawful good character, chaotic good character, lawful evil character, chaotic evil character, and of course the swing voter is true neutral.
Yeah. And
Like just politics,
the chaotic evil character kills the rest of the party and steals their money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are ways to play chaotic evil and not be a dick to your party specifically.
It's more fun if you're a dick to the party.
No.
Yeah, but you want to be I'm going to like rearrange your bedroll and like draw a mustache on you kind of dick, not a game ending dick.
Yeah, well that's true because you don't want to ruin the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you got to play the long game if you're chaotic evil.
Yeah.
You are playing to win the game at the end, so you go through the entire adventure and then kill everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyways, we've gotten a bit into the weeds because we are not talking about D&D, nor are we talking about Dr. Faustus. Those things that I needed to address from last time aside, we are talking about Edward II, which is...
Now, if you want to talk about chaotic characters...
Yeah. Though, I will say, and Hissy may be angry at my school system for this, I hadn't heard of Christopher Marlowe until recently.
Yeah.
EXE is rebooting, please wait.
Yeah.
You broke me.
Yeah.
It's dreadful, isn't it, Hissy?
Yeah.
I mean, at least
Yeah.
At least I read Edward. I've read the book one we're doing tonight in high school.
Yeah.
So.
So.
Yeah. In high school we just did Shakespeare.
Yeah, Shakespeare's boring.
Yeah, no, we did a lot of Much Ado. There was references to when we did Much Ado. There were some references made to Edward II.
Yeah.
When we were talking about the masked ball and some of the imagery from Edward II.
Yeah.
In a situation of putting context to the idea that these masked balls and things were quite common in sort of this style and this era of literature. And
again, Jeff.
We did like in English one we did Romeo and Juliet, and in drama we did in one of my years of drama we did the Scottish play.
I managed to avoid both of those in school.
I was actually in the Scottish play. Well, of course.
Who did you play
for drama?
Who did you play?
Malcolm.
Okay.
So I actually survived.
I survived the Scottish play. You should have that on a t-shirt.
Yeah, you know what? I should make a
survived the
t-shirt
Scottish
of
play.
that that says "I survived the Scottish" and put it on my Teespring. Yeah.
Could have been worse. You could have been doing Hamlet.
Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, basically everyone dies in Hamlet.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it could have been worse. We could have been doing Christ, what's the
I mean, you did Romeo and Juliet. That's bad enough.
Well, it's the one where Shakespeare basically goes Tarantino, and it's even questionable if Shakespeare even wrote it.
Shakespeare's such
Gonna
a
have to be
freaking
more
pessimist.
specific than that.
It's the one where people get baked into a pie. It's on the tip of my tongue. There's a T, and it's a name. There's a T. It's a Roman name with a T.
Tempest.
Tacitus.
Tempest.
No.
Oh wait, no, the Roman plays, Shakespeare's Roman plays.
Yeah.
No.
He did Coriolanus. He did Julius Caesar and Antony and Cleopatra.
Yeah.
So
I don't think anyone was baked into a pie in any of them.
Titus Andronicus. That's the
Titus. Yeah. Okay.
Titus. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. There's no reason that when you Google Shakespeare's Roman plays, that is not listed as one of them.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, like I said, it's questionable as to whether or not he actually wrote it, and if he did, it was like really early in his career.
Mm-hmm. But anyway, Edward II. Speaking of Romans, let's get started.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of references to classical.
Yes.
A lot of classical allusions in this.
So,
you can read along with this.
So first, should I set this up with the conspiracy theory history research rabbit hole I went into, or should that wait till the end? Because I don't think there would be time for it if it waited till the end.
Right. Let's run a quick poll in the comments. How many people are actually familiar with this plot?
Yeah.
You kind of need to be familiar with the plot to understand the conspiracies.
Yeah. Well, actually,
take a while. The chat's lagged, so
yeah.
Why don't you give a rundown of the plot, Hissy? Why don't we do half an hour or so as a rundown of the plot?
Okay.
Then we can do the conspiracy.
The conspiracies. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So the plot is very simple. The king is dead. Long live the king. His son has taken the throne, and his son has a lover who was exiled because he was too distracting to the son. And there's a whole other shenanigans about him being a commoner and being in love with the prince and all the rest of it. Who was exiled, who he's sent back for, and the nobles do not like him.
Yes.
This is the very basic plot of this book.
Yeah. The basic plot is Edward II is crushing hard on Gaveston, and the nobles do not like.
Although I think the nobles, the way the book reads, or the way the play plays, it's questionable whether they have more of an issue with the fact that Gaveston's a man, or whether they have more of an issue with the fact that he's a commoner.
I think it's definitely a commoner thing.
Yeah,
it's definitely more of a class thing than a like a homophobia thing.
Well, the homophobia thing wasn't as big then either.
It wasn't talked about. As long as the king produced an heir, they didn't really care.
Yeah. It's like you could fuck as many guys as you wanted, as long as you still fucked the woman and you got an heir.
Yeah, but the queen does spend a lot of time whinging that he won't go near her.
Yeah.
Although the way she whinges, I'm not surprised.
Well, also,
she
is getting a bit of what's his name on the side.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of questionable that if some of the heirs were actually heirs back then, because I mean, it wasn't just the kings who screwed around; the queens did too. So
yeah, and obviously the king's son plays a role in this. This story, and it does make you wonder why these people who were so interested in decency and propriety, supposedly, would back a prince who they couldn't actually prove was, a prince.
Yeah.
But they all fucked like bunnies back then. So
you say back then like it's not still a thing that happens now.
That being said,
it's more frowned on now. If you're royalty.
It by the end of the play, you kind of get the sense that they wanted that the head, the ringleader more wanted a puppet than to actually back.
Yeah, no, it's definitely it's the installation of a puppet government is what it is, and it's definitely there's a lot of power plays and politics going on here that are not. Yes. It's almost like Gaveston is the excuse, not the cause.
Yeah.
And I mean, granted, because Edward II, as he's presented in this play, is not a great king. He's a bit. I mean, in every there's a great audiobook version of this, and I tell you what I'm going to do. I am going to find an extract of the way he's read, because the way he's read is so camp and flimsy. I just. He's I heard it and I thought, if you've ever when you get those comedians who play up the camp, he sounds like that. He's not a great voice at all.
Well, do you think it might have been the fact that the voice actor was told to play it gay and he leaned into the camp for that?
They will have leaned into the camp, and you do have to. Shakespearean theatre does have a habit of leaning into particular aspects of a character in that way.
Yeah.
But he's very softly spoken in a lot of things. And he does just come across as a bit of a himbo. He is just I wouldn't want that guy as my king either.
So, anyways, my little research rabbit hole. So, as some of us, as those of us on the panel likely know, but some might not. Also, hello, Scummer. Better late than never. But anyways, troops of actors were patronized by, the elites, right?
Yeah.
So
I know where you're going with this.
And when I was reading through the beginning of the play, Edward II, in some of his quarrels with the church, reminded me of a somewhat contemporary king. And so I was like, okay, so who patronized Marlowe to make this play? And I looked, because I was definitely picking up the rampant anti-Catholicism at the beginning, and the way Edward's romantic affairs were portrayed. And the play was originally staged by the Lord Pembroke's Men.
Pembroke.
Yeah, Pembroke. Which was started by the second of that dynasty, Earl of Pembroke, who his name was Henry Herbert and happened to be the maternal nephew of Catherine Parr.
Yeah. Good research.
Yes.
I'm glad you said it. You saved me having to draw that schematic for you.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of. It's very cleverly done.
Yeah.
The thing you have to understand with a lot of theatre at that time, theatre was very rarely written without a political agenda of some sort. So, and it was essentially the advertising of its day.
Yeah.
You know, you want to run for office, you put on a play. You want to do this, you put on a play. Because that's how you got information out to the masses. The masses were largely illiterate, so you couldn't publish a pamphlet and see it get past the university doors.
Yeah.
You couldn't, you could send out criers, but, it's a lot of money, not a lot of impact.
Yeah.
So plays and drama were the main way of putting out information. So to fund something like that doesn't. It's the equivalent of. Yeah, okay, he had a political axe to grind. Yeah.
Yeah, and also another fun tidbit, though I couldn't exactly dig up what his roles were, but he did play significant. The Earl of Pembroke did play significant roles in rather two significant trials of the time. One of which being the trial of Mary Queen of Scots.
Well, I think we can reasonably expect that he wasn't coming to her defense.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So yeah, before we even get started, this play was paid for, promoted, and presented by an ardent Protestant, an staunch anti-Catholic.
Yes.
Which explains a lot.
Though I will say something else, that the version of the play that we have today may not be the version that was originally, and this goes the same for all plays of the time, may not actually be the version of the play that was originally staged, because plays didn't actually get written down and published until years after they were originally staged. Yeah, sure. And that was only if they were popular enough to be worth publishing.
Mm.
So there is that. Basically everything you read in a play from that, if you're reading or watching a play of that time, basically everything has to be taken with, okay, was this actually original to the to the original author or not?
I would say the one exception to that is probably the later Shakespeare works.
Yeah.
By the time he had the Globe set up and he was putting on his own stuff,
yeah,
he was keeping records.
Yeah.
But even still, there's sort of questions of certain things Shakespeare that are attributed to Shakespeare, whether they were or not.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, Titus Andronicus earlier.
Yeah.
So it's very. Take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to read any text from this era, particularly dramas, without having an understanding of the context of them. Because if you don't understand not just the textual context of what history it's based on, if it's a historical drama, but also the contemporary context of where it was being presented to.
Yeah.
You have to understand what the audience are going to hear.
And,
so, if I make a joke today about politicians, for example, that is going to land very differently to, even if I make a joke about, say, someone like Reagan. If I make a joke about Reagan today, that lands differently because we live in the context of Trump and Johnson.
Yeah.
And we see how things have progressed. It lands differently than it would have making a joke about Reagan during Reagan's time.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of that going on. That's why there's so many, articles out there about which Roman emperor is Donald Trump. No, that's not the point. What they're doing is they're trying to create associations in the mind of the audience. But the problem with doing that is that those associations change with each generation of audience.
And
which is why I have to understand the context of the text in order to understand how the text was intended.
And one last fun fact about the Lord Admiral's men, or not the Lord Admiral's men, the Lord Pembroke's men. Lord Admiral's men was actually the troop that first did Dr. Faustus. So it seems like Marlowe was a bit of a troop whore.
Yeah.
In more ways than one, more than likely.
So
yeah.
But the Lord Pembroke's men also seem to have been the start of two other famous drama names at the time. One, Richard Burbage, and who, if I remember right, actually played Edward in the first staging.
Oh.
And one, William Shakespeare.
Well, the thing is, again, Shakespeare and Marlowe are contemporary. Yeah. There's only so many rich people who want to put plays on.
Yeah.
And there's only so many playwrights. So if you look at playwrights in that era, you'll probably find the same half a dozen patrons between them.
Yeah.
Because they're the only people who can afford to do it.
Yeah, though from what I've read, it seems like Shakespeare was in Pembroke's Men in his acting days before he made the jump to writing.
Yeah. So again, and it's this thing of Shakespeare is known to have held Marlowe in very high esteem.
Yeah.
And you can see the impact of some of Marlowe's work on certain Shakespeare plays.
Oh, yeah. I read Edward II. It reads like a Shakespeare play.
Yeah, well, no, Shakespeare reads like Edward II.
Well, yeah, you know what I mean, but...
Yeah, especially in the royal plays.
Yeah.
And in a lot of the style. Now, the thing with Shakespeare is, it's kind of like, the way I like to think about Shakespeare and Marlowe, Shakespeare is the pulp fiction, if you like, to Marlowe's high fantasy. One is more prolific, one produces far higher quality. It's the old joke about, students making a vase in class.
Yeah.
One group told to make something perfect and don't make anything. And one group told to make as many as possible and eventually start making beautiful things.
Yeah.
Or it's, it's monkeys at typewriters, it's whatever you want. It's that's going on with Shakespeare. Whereas
Shakespeare
Marlowe,
is the Andrew Lloyd Webber.
Yeah.
The Andrew Shakespeare, the Andrew Lloyd Webber of Elizabethan theater.
Pretty much. And it is that. And it's why I'm a great believer in quality over quantity. Because, if I throw enough darts at a board, I'm going to hit triple 20 eventually because it's not going to go anywhere else. But
it depends how bad you are at throwing them.
Hark how the phantom of the opera doth reside inside thy mind.
I hate you. But yeah, it's one of those, isn't it? And I always took it as a bit of a two fingers up at Shakespeare, that they said if you put enough monkeys in a room with enough typewriters, eventually they'll reproduce the works of Shakespeare, because that's pretty much what Shakespeare was doing.
Yeah.
It was a monkey at a typewriter and it's just going, and something's got to hit.
Yeah.
Whereas Marlowe was not as prolific, but when he does produce, he's an instant classic. He's that writer you get writers who produce, a dozen books a year, stick them all up on, a free self-publishing thing.
So first Shakespeare was Andrew Lloyd Webber. Now he's James Patterson.
Yeah, no, so okay, let me put it this way. Shakespeare is the James Patterson to Marlowe's George R.R. Martin.
Yeah.
Oh, I think Marlowe's better than George R.R. Martin.
Yeah.
But what I'm getting at is it's the prolific versus the...
I tell you, Shakespeare isn't. He's not the J.K. Rowling.
Or okay, and of course you had to do that. So first, damn it, Jen.
Damn it, Jen.
And then, of course, channel punching.
Yeah. No. Yeah. So it's.
Here's possibly a good a good example, though not too good, seeing as how they weren't exactly contemporaries, but they arguably wrote in the same genre. Marlowe is Tolkien. Shakespeare is Piers Anthony.
Yeah, that's probably a really good analogy.
To put it in a way that's got absolutely nothing to do with writing, if I have a battery chicken and it gives me 1 egg a day,
and
I also have a contract with Fabergé, I know which egg I want at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Fabergé will make me 1 egg, the battery hen will make me 300, but one of them's made of goals and has pearls and shit on it.
Yeah.
And worth a lot more money than those 300 eggs.
So it's that basically what's going on there, which is why I've always preferred Marlowe to Shakespeare.
Yeah.
That's, I think, as well, because Marlowe's texts are a lot more intelligent than Shakespeare's texts.
Yeah.
Shakespeare does like to fall back on his awkward sex jokes and his weak frigging romances.
There's a lot of standard tropes. He was he wrote the pulp fiction of his day, didn't he?
Yeah, he did the pulp fiction.
Drink produces 3 things, good sir: sleep, nose painting, and urine.
Exactly. That's not funny to me.
And that's in the Scottish play. That is the comedic relief for the Scottish play.
But like, even Marlowe manages to avoid a lot of the racist tropes that exist in plays of that era.
Yeah.
Whereas Shakespeare, if anyone's ever studied Caliban from The Tempest, that's all on its own.
Oh, and Taming of the Shrew.
Yeah. And there's a lot of it about the in Othello, and Much Ado About Nothing. Shocking. And so, Shakespeare was a rampant,
and
wrote as a rampant racist.
And heck, the worst, from a modern context, the worst race thing in Dr. Faustus was the bit where they're going to be like, "Oh, we're going to rule the world," and they make a comparison to what the Spaniards are doing in the Americas at the time.
And there's some references to Mephistopheles being like a big dark character, but again, that's just your very stereotypical, dark devil. The Tempest is awesome, Sam, but there's a lot of as with all Shakespeare, there's a lot of problematic elements, and I don't like the Tempest at all. It's one of those stories where she's a ditz and he's a himbo, and they deserve each other, but I shouldn't have to watch it.
Yeah.
And I mean, the movie version of it, Prospero's books, was a fucking dreadful movie.
Yeah. Anyway, back to Marlowe.
It really is.
Back to Marlowe.
Right, let's get started on Marlowe. Right. I want to talk about the relationship between Edward and Gaveston.
Okay.
Because it is central to the plot, but it's also very telling, and it's presented very early on. In fact, it's the first thing that's presented.
First line.
Yeah.
This young man, his father has just died.
Yeah.
He's just been thrown arguably one of the greatest burdens that can be placed on a human being.
Yeah.
And the first thing he does is write to his boyfriend.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's his boyfriend reading the letter. Gav, my father is deceased. Come, Gaveston, and share the kingdom with thy dearest friend. First line's the first set. Yeah.
And then an entire soliloquy about how much he loves Edward.
Yeah.
A huge soliloquy.
Gaveston likes his soliloquies. He's very good at them.
Yeah.
He's a very loquacious character. But what gets me about this one as well, the way they interact as characters is very... I had a teacher who said that they were just they were very immature as lovers.
Yeah.
And as in a relationship. But the only way that argument holds up is if you don't actually pay attention to some of the things Gaveston's saying.
Yeah, like for instance, sweet prince I come, these thy amorous lines might have enforced me to have swum from France.
Yes, and then the next line, and like Leander gasped upon the sand, so thou wouldst smile and take me in thy arms.
Yeah.
Have immediately. Gaveston might be a commoner, but he's not an idiot.
Yeah.
He's not an idiot. He's very well read.
And actually, I'm sorry to tie it back to Faustus, but
oh no, it's impossible to read one of these if you've read the other and not regularly refer back. Don't worry about it.
In referring to, I forget exactly where in the play it is, but there is a reference to the myth of Diana and.
I could say yes. I've got it here. It's in the third soliloquy.
Yeah.
Second or third, depending on how you count them. And yes, it's in there. But I have a list of all the classical references Gaveston makes in those soliloquies. So do you want to start from the top? Let's go with Leander first. For those who don't know, Leander was known for swimming across the Hellespont every night to spend time with the love of his life. So this is what Gaveston's getting there, and it's kind of this one is a little bit of foreshadowing, because the second he arrives in England, there are people trying to force him away again.
Yeah,
and it draws that parallel really nicely.
So there, is there anything else in the first soliloquy you want to touch on?
Elysium, the references to Elysium. Yeah. It is a Elizabethan trope to talk about Elysium as a synonym pretty much for heaven.
I don't think it's specifically Elizabethan. I think it's a straight up Renaissance trope.
Yeah, it's pretty much a Renaissance trope. There's the... There's what amuses me about this right from the start. It presents Gaveston as very intellectual, very intelligent, and yet whimsical.
Yeah.
He's beautifully whimsical, and that's what the king loves about him. But the thing is with Gaveston, he's intelligent but whimsical. The king
Just
is
realised I
whimsical
was
but
still
not
muted.
intelligent.
Yeah.
And then we have the entrance of the poor men.
Yes, where we get some other lovely foreshadowing.
Yeah, go
on.
Because so the poor men, come to Gaveston and seek to serve him. And he asks the first one, "What can you do?" Second one, "I can ride." And Gaveston says, "But I have no horse." And so he asks the second one, "What can you do?" Or "What are you?" And the second one's, I'm a traveler." And he says, "Okay, yeah, sure, you can bring me gossip," essentially.
Yeah. He's basically creating a information network.
Yeah, and then the third one, and here's the foreshadowing. Yeah. But first, Sam.
Yes, it hurts my heart. Hades is not hell.
Yeah. But anyways, and the third one is where we get our foreshadowing. "And what art thou? A soldier that hath served against the Scot. Why, there are hospitals for such as you. I have no war, and therefore, sir, be gone. Farewell, and perish by a soldier's hand. Thou wouldst reward them with a hospital."
That lands so hard in the modern context of, in a lot of modern contexts in the way veterans are treated.
Yeah.
But it's, oops, excuse me, and it's a very pointed barb.
Yeah.
Because it does foreshadow the play.
Yeah.
And it foreshadows the end of the plot very, very interestingly.
Well, at least the end of Gaveston's plot, very interestingly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I was like, I have no idea, the events this is based off of. This is my first time reading the play. That's foreshadowing as hell.
Yeah. With regards to the events it's based off of, I will just say Edward II was deposed.
Yep.
He served as king for 20 years.
Yeah.
But again, as with all kings in British history who have a less than stellar record, he was never meant to be king. He was the fourth son of Edward I, and only became heir apparent when his elder brother died.
Yeah.
And again, this is something that happens a lot. Show me an English king who was not supposed to be king, and I'll show you a bad English king.
Yeah.
Also, another thing that I kind of dug up in my research rabbit hole, because because of a previous dynasty of Earls of Pembroke, the second Earl of Pembroke did take place in the life of Edward II. And spoiler warning for, a centuries old play and for something we are going to reach eventually. But, well, spoiler warning for something that has already been foreshadowed. So the Earl of Pembroke actually did did join in the first rebellion and was granted guardianship of Gaveston when he was captured. And when the Earl of Leicester had him murdered under Pembroke's watch, in real history, Pembroke swapped sides and ardently supported the king. In the play, Pembroke just kind of disappears from the plot.
Yeah.
And I find it very interesting because after I found out that, this, that this play was performed under the patronage of the Elizabeth, of the Tudor second Earl of Pembroke. In this play, Pembroke barely he's in a lot of scenes. He has barely any lines. He does, and they're all very short. He does take custody of Gaveston, but when Gaveston is murdered, he just disappears from the plot and we don't ever see him again.
Yeah. And this is what the Renaissance dramas do. They like to keep it nice and neat, which is fair because it's not a history book.
Yeah.
There were a lot of politics going on. The Lancasters in particular were...
Oh, yeah, Lancaster. It wasn't Leicester. Sorry. Leicester is involved in the play, but yeah, it was Lancaster that murdered Gaveston.
The Lancasters...
Spoilers.
Yeah.
Yeah, Alfred the Great might be one exception to that rule, Jeff. But there's always got to be an exception that proves the rule. The problem with the idea, as Jeff has just put in the chat, of the heir and the spare, is that the spare is never properly educated for the role.
Yeah.
Oh.
Lest he become too ambitious.
Which,
doesn't go well if the heir dies.
Yeah.
Which happened a lot back then because the kings were always having wars and fighting.
You've got to understand as well, it was Edward II who lost to Robert the Bruce at Bannockburn.
Yeah.
This is not a popular king. Can I just put that out there?
Yeah.
But again, going back to, this was done by someone who stood, who was part of the trial for Mary, Queen of Scots.
Yeah.
There's politics going on in the presentation of this play.
Yeah.
And in the things the contemporaries would have known who Edward II was.
Yeah.
They would have known the story of Robert the Bruce.
Yeah.
Therefore, for this to be put on by someone who was staunchly anti-Catholic, it's there even when it's not stated categorically.
Yeah.
Because Robert Bruce is never mentioned in this play. It doesn't have to be. You say Edward II and the British audience knows Robert the Bruce. Sorry, English audience. I should say English audience, and by English I mean English.
Yeah, and the Scots are referenced in the play.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
As are the Dispensers a lot.
Yeah.
But essentially, these names become focuses for different political agendas that are going on within the play, rather than actual representations of the people they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
So Lancaster is the anti-king, the person who wants to take over. He's the person who wants to get rid of Gaveston and get rid of the king. Dispenser is the loyal lackey.
Yeah.
They don't. it's highly unlikely that the real people that these names are attached to were that black and white.
Yeah.
No, because it's never that black and white.
So, and this is why, especially with dramas based on history, don't take it as gospel and don't take it as historical fact.
Yeah.
There'll be a lot in there that is very close to the fact, and it will give you a basic outline of what happened.
Yeah, I'm sorry to break any of your hearts that are watching, but I'm pretty sure Julius Caesar didn't actually speak in stage directions.
Yeah. I'm also pretty sure that once you've got so many knife wounds in you, even uttering the words "et tu, Brutus" would be difficult.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's that, but I want to focus a little bit on. I'm gonna say it's after the exit of the poor men.
Yeah.
And Gaveston starts talking about what men he does want serving him.
Yeah.
Now, this soliloquy is beautiful.
Yeah.
This is the imagery it stirs up is it's Elysium, it's a Garden of Eden. You can just if you imagine a sort of a beautiful garden like Versailles with like pretty women running around and young lithe men, but there's also an edge to it, and it's very carefully written that way. And there's quite a lot of it going on. There's a lot of imagery of sort of it's very European in its imagery. And they talk about Italian masks. He talks like, for those who don't know, he talks about Sylvian nymphs. Like Sylvian nymphs, his pages shall be clad. Now, pages were stereotypically young boys, and essentially what he's saying is he wants to create a situation where he's got young, but he's got eye candy at his beck and call. That's what's his men like satyrs. So again, you've got the nymph and satyrs. He's very, and that's a callback to Greek pedestry and Roman pedestry, and young boys as effeminate and grown men as more masculine, but still maintaining that homoeroticism.
And here comes the Diana and Actaeon.
Yeah, the Diana and Actaeon reference.
And of course, the other time Diana and Actaeon is referenced in Marlowe's work in Dr. Faustus, it's a lead up to a sex joke.
Yeah. Well, this entire soliloquy is a sex joke, right?
Yeah.
It's quite erotic, really.
It was a very erotic soliloquy. And it's you get from this, Gaveston is what's the polite term of the era? Not a confirmed bachelor, that's the 1800s. He's bent as a 9-bob note.
Yeah.
And he's quite clearly got no interest in women whatsoever.
Yeah.
That's how he's presented.
How does he say it? Sometime a lovely boy in Diane's shape with hair that gilds the water as it glides.
Yeah. And this is after talking about his men like satyrs and his Sylvian nymph pages.
And of course, we all know what satyrs were famous for.
Yeah, satyrs were famous for being bawdy, sexual, proud. If you see an image of a satyr, look at where its right hand is, because it's probably holding a protrusion of some sort.
Yeah.
Either its own or someone else's.
Such things as these best please His Majesty.
So basically what he's getting out here is Edward's a voyeur, and he's gonna make sure he's got plenty to look at.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it actually, what you said is it actually hits at that with the line, and in his sportful hands an olive tree.
Yeah.
If that's not a euphemism, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
Well, that's another reference to Diana and Actaeon, and Actaeon hiding while watching Diana.
Mm.
Yeah.
And it's all that he's essentially talking about. He's going to put on a show for Edward, and he's going to make Edward's life to be filled with beauty, but it's a very carnal beauty he's aiming for.
Yeah.
It's not, and it's living and it's breathing. It's not artwork. It's not anything. Gaveston has a great zest for life. He loves life and he loves beautiful things.
Yeah.
And the thing with him is Gaveston knows where the line is. Gaveston is intelligent enough to know that, yes, you can love those things, but you've got to keep your head on your shoulders.
Yeah.
But he's also intelligent enough to know that Edward doesn't. And he's realised that if he gives Edward these things, he may, and I quote, draw the pliant king which way I please.
Yeah.
As long as he keeps the king interested and surrounded by pretty things, he can get away with anything he pleases. So, I mean, Gaveston is not necessarily a nasty piece of work. He's not at all, in the way that insinuates. He's just after Edward, and that's pretty much him. He's happy enough with what he's got.
Yeah.
But he knows the power he holds over the king.
And he also knows that the only way to survive in court politics is to have the favor of the king.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And the way it's done as well is very much, the Romans put on games and lavish feasts and things when they were running for election. It's almost got that flavour to it of keep the king happy, keep him occupied, and let other people run the country. I think Gaveston is a little bit aware that Edward is not the best statesman, and that's putting it mildly. And he's just, I love this soliloquy. I really do. But the ending is, it reads like, because the way soliloquies were presented, they're essentially breaking the fourth wall. Yeah. This is what they're doing. This is directed at the audience, and no one else in the play is supposed to hear what Gaveston's saying.
Yeah.
But the line at the end is very important, not only because it shows that it's a stage direction. He says, I'll stand aside for the king and his parliament, but it also is very cleverly, Gaveston has no interest in ruling.
Yeah.
Gaveston is not a political figure.
Mm.
He's landed on his feet, the king's taken a liking to him, and that's as far as he's happy enough with that. Which kind of throws the entire play and the entire plot into turmoil. Yeah. Because no one ever bothered to ask him. And if they had, they'd have realised, just leave him alone. He's got no designs on anything.
Yeah.
But they assumed, and it says a lot about Lancaster, that he assumed Gaveston was manipulating the king behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Because Lancaster didn't look and say, what is Gaveston doing? He's saying, what would I do in Gaveston's position?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So immediately, the fact that Lancaster doesn't
Lancaster thinks that Gaveston is manipulating Edward, and the Mortimers are just bigots.
Yeah, pretty much. But it says a lot about Lancaster that he assumes that's what Gaveston's doing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I studied this text at A level, as I said, and we spent about 6 weeks on it 3 of those weeks were spent on these first 3 soliloquies.
Yeah.
Because these are the important parts of the text. The rest of the plot is almost incidental to how beautiful the prose and the performance and just everything about these soliloquies is.
I like how many
I've
sides
got a little bit of a crush
Gaveston
on
gets.
fictional Gaveston? I'm sorry, husband, but fictional Gaveston is just, he breaks my heart, okay?
Right, but he flirts with the audience too. It's part of his role.
He's such a flirt.
He is.
But he has fun with it. And he's very... do you know what I want to see? Or what fan fiction I want to see if has been written yet and may write it myself? I want Gaveston and Deadpool to sit down over a drink.
I can just imagine that most of the people in the audience watching this play were pissing themselves with laughter at Gaveston's little asides.
Yeah. That's the point of Gaveston. He is...
Yeah.
Gaveston is the satirical narrator here.
Yeah.
He's the one who looks at all this and goes, what a bunch of...
Well, I mean, in the first one, after Lancaster and the king come in and Gaveston's standing aside and the king addresses Lancaster and Lancaster goes, my lord, and then Gaveston's aside to the audience and the Earl of Lancaster. Do I abhor him? You know, and it's the sarcasm and the thing is just dripping off the way he says it to the audience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, do you know who he reminds me of? Or who reminds me of him, I should say, given the timelines involved. If you've ever seen Frankie Howard in Up Pompeii.
Oh, Frankie Howard, yeah.
The way he talks about the masters in Up Pompeii is exactly how Gaveston talks about the upper classes in this play. It's the exact same tone. It's almost
the sarcasm is just dripping in the air, and it's
almost affectionate disdain.
Yeah,
if that's possible. So he absolutely thinks they're a bunch of upper class twits.
Yeah,
but it's almost affectionate in the way he ribs at them, and it is just fun. So if you want lessons on how to punch up when writing satire, listen to Gaveston. Pay attention to Gaveston.
Yeah.
And then we, of course, have the establishment of Lancaster and Mortimer.
Yeah. Both of them. The elder and the younger.
And yet they are established without actually being present. Well, I mean, they are present, but they don't speak while the king and Gaveston tear shreds into them.
Yeah.
And
the villain Mortimer, I'll be his death.
And Lancaster very quickly decides, not happening. The minute he lays eyes on Gaveston, he's ready to sell all his honours, all his earldoms, the lot, to get rid of him.
Yeah.
Well, they kind of all are, aren't they? They don't want Gaveston there at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They see him as a threat.
Yeah. But the main issue with this play is that Edward is so weak.
Yeah.
If he just stuck to his guns for once instead of, umming and ahhing and yes, I'll do what they say, no, I won't. He
basically forgets that he's a king until he's no longer a king.
Yeah. And then all he does is mourn the fact that he used to be a king.
Yeah.
Although, of course, historically, by this point, the royal family had... This is why I think you're right with the references to sort of the Henry and what have you, because the royal family went into decline very quickly.
Yeah.
And the power of the royal family went into decline very quickly after Cromwell.
Yeah.
And Edward very much behaves as if he thinks he's the kind of king who has no power, as opposed to thinking he's the kind of king who can raise an army with a word.
Yeah.
The fact that most of his main generals are against him is probably what's going on there.
Yeah.
He doesn't have the power of the keys.
Yeah. But Edward has got the measure of these people as well, because you've got the treacherous Mortimers and the high-minded Earl of Lancaster. So he does have the measure of them.
Just not the wherewithal to do anything about it.
Yeah, he's... You know how we talk about armchair critics?
Yeah.
Edward is a bit of an armchair king. He knows it in theory, but he doesn't know how to put it in practice.
Though it's kind of funny because, you know, once again, spoilers for a 16th century play, his son does know.
His son is very good at playing politics.
Yeah.
But then again, with a mother like that.
Yeah.
Because the mother's very good at playing. She's very good at turning on the waterworks and the crocodile teeth.
Because this, you know, the second Edward III is crowned, bang, he acts like a king, and
he takes control just like that.
and Mortimer loses his puppet and his head.
Yeah. And so it makes you wonder. Edward III is quite clearly presented as an opportunist in this.
Yeah.
He is, for the most part, a victim of circumstance who just so happens to switch on at the right time.
Yeah.
And that's the crucial difference between him and his father. But that's getting right to the end of the play. So
yeah.
And then we have the initial thing. A lot of these people claim they didn't like Gaveston because he was poor. Now, poor is relative.
Yeah.
Gaveston is the son of a knight. He's not nobility. He's the son of a knight. As opposed to a lord or an earl or something like that. He's not landed. That's what they don't like.
Yeah.
He's not a landed gentleman. He's just son of a knight, came up as a squire.
Yeah.
That's what they mean by poor or common. They don't mean people like us.
No.
Now, knights were upper middle class or lower upper class, if there's such a thing. He would have been educated. He would have had a good education. He would have been, you know, well trained to his life and his station, with a view to having enough money in his pocket to be able to live comfortably.
Yeah.
We're not talking about the king's plucked a poor kid off the street. It's not what we're talking about here at all. This tells you that the depth of the, I'm going to call it the classism and the bigotry going on here. That they can't stand the fact of a man who didn't inherit his land being that close to the king. And they take Gaveston to be a bit of a man of the people, which, if you read his soliloquies, is really not.
Yeah.
He really is not a man of the people. He's his own man.
Yeah.
And arguably the king's his man, but that's how that goes. So the king decides to drop basically a bunch of drops an earldom on him, makes him High Lord High Chamberlain, makes him his personal secretary. The king kind of love bombs him a little bit here. And you can see where Edward's logic is of, if my men don't like him because he's not landed, well, I'll make him landed.
Yeah.
And that'll fix it. You can see the logic. But it's very naive.
Yeah.
Because the minute he does that, jealousy kicks in.
Yeah.
A nouveau riche, new money. Which we all know old money doesn't like new money.
Oh, no. And that's still the case now.
And that's what's going on here. So he's kind of giving Gaveston the rope that Lancaster's going to hang him with.
Yeah.
And poor Gaveston doesn't want to take it because he knows better. He's perfectly content to be the little nobody in the king's bedroom waiting for him to come back after a day at work.
Yeah.
But Edward takes that as a bit of false modesty. It's not false modesty, it's Gaveston knowing better than you, Edward.
Yeah. And you know, and the younger Mortimer does have a like soliloquy that basically it's like, yeah, this is a class thing, not a sex thing.
Yeah, and it is in that sense. I think Kent has a lot to say as well.
Yeah, but
there's one line from Kent that's very interesting where he says, "Brother, the least of these may well suffice for one of greater birth than Gaveston."
Yeah.
So he's basically saying, look, bye, Sam.
Bye.
Someone keep the water away from Sam.
Yeah.
Not getting wet. Right. And that line essentially sums up what they would have us all believe is the beginning and end of their motivation.
Yeah.
Do I think that the fact that Gaveston is a man had no impact whatsoever on the way they behaved? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
But if you ask me to put it in percentages, it's 90% the fact that Gaveston is a
lower
commoner.
class.
It's 5% the fact that the king is completely besotted with him. It's probably 9% the fact that the king's completely besotted with him, and 1% the fact that he's a bloke. That's what's going on.
Well,
here.
Actually, you know what union is most called unnatural in the play?
Go on. I'll let you say it.
The union between Isabel and Mortimer.
Yes, because it's extramarital.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, and also something of a
interracial.
class thing.
Yeah, it's also interracial.
Yeah.
And the fact that she's an upper class lady and he's only a landed gentry. She's a princess, he's a gentry.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on in that relationship.
Yeah.
Politics wise.
But I want to read out Mortimer's soliloquy because I did actually highlight it.
Go on, go for it.
Yeah. Uncle, his wanton humor grieves not me. But this I scorn, that one so basely born should by his sovereign's favor grow so pert, and riot it with the treasure of the realm. While soldiers mutiny for want of pay, he wears a lord's revenue on his back, and Midas-like he jets it in the court, with base outlandish cullions at his heels, whose proud fantastic liveries make such show, that if Proteus, god of shapes, appeared, I have not seen a dapper jack so brisk. He wears a short Italian hooded cloak, larded with pearl, and in his Tuscan cap, a jewel of more value than the crown, while others walk below the king, and he from out the window laugh at such as we, and flout our train and jest at our entire. Uncle, 'tis that makes me most impatient.
Yeah. And so you can understand your soldiers are crying out for pay. Money's tight. And this is the reference to losing to the Bruce and Bannockburn and everything else. Soldiers are crying out for pay. There's no money to pay them.
Yeah.
Loss after loss after loss militarily.
Yeah.
He's got his own issues to contend with. And when you read that soliloquy in isolation, he's being very reasonable.
Yeah.
But the problem is he's making assumptions. This entire play, and this is another Elizabethan trope of Renaissance trope, even of characters who make assumptions and drive the plot.
Yeah.
The sheer volume of Shakespeare and Marlowe that is based solely on the fact that some idiot didn't stop and ask.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole Much Ado About Nothing, it's there in the damn title.
Yeah.
And then, especially when you contrast him there, because that's Mortimer, that's
younger Mortimer.
That's the young Earl Mortimer.
Yeah.
Whereas the elder Earl Mortimer, when speaking to his son, comes out with the line, because the young's talking about how later, I'm not sure it's this far on, but he talks about how he's been made Lord of Cornwall and all this, that, and the other. And it's Earl Mortimer who says, quote, "Doth no man take exception at the slave?" And Lancaster responds, "All stomach him, but none dare speak a word."
Yeah, I think that's like earlier in the scene where this soliloquy.
It is. It's earlier in the scene, but it's important because it shows the difference between Earl and younger.
Yeah. Well, and like before younger, like, so before this soliloquy, or it's not exactly a soliloquy because it is technically to another character. But you know, everyone except the older and the younger Mortimer leave the stage. And you know, the elder Mortimer has a speech that's like, let's let him have his fun with Gaveston, and eventually we'll get him to turn his head elsewhere. And then the younger Mortimer has his speech, and then the elder Mortimer says, "But nephew, now you see the king is changed." And then younger Mortimer, "Then so I am, and live to do him service. But whilst I have a sword, a hand, a heart, I will not yield to any such upstart. You know my mind. Come, uncle, let's away." And of course, I mean, it's not exactly, because there is a stage direction afterwards, but classic Elizabethan, in the scene with a rhyme.
And there's a lot that every sort of really, all the harsh stuff is put in the voices of the Mortimers. And there's also Pembroke kind of, it's like two schoolyard bullies and their lackey.
Yeah.
The Mortimers and Pembroke. And I say that because Lancaster is a completely different kettle of fish. Lancaster is political to the end.
Yeah.
I genuinely don't think Lancaster cares what his excuse is for bringing Edward down.
Yeah.
He just wants an excuse.
Yeah.
Because he gets to the point, you know, that they essentially agree that they start talking about they talk the king into re-banishing Gaveston.
Yeah.
And there is this little, I'm going to call it a soliloquy, of King Edward talking about how they've threatened to get the Pope on him, essentially.
Yeah.
You won't listen to me, so I'm going to go get my big brother.
Yeah.
And this is historically something that happened, that the king had to essentially write to the Pope and promise him that all hell wasn't going to break loose with him having Gaveston about. Because we got to the point where Edward was being threatened with excommunication by the Archbishop for having Gaveston around.
Yeah.
Which, in this era of politics, there is nothing that compares. This, like, even if you had a president who was, and actually understood how shameful it was for it to happen, if you had a president who was impeached, it still wouldn't be as great a political blow to him as someone being excommunicated in this contemporary era.
Well, and that's where we kind of get into the Henry VIII squabbling with the church commentary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because, well, Gaveston has a pretty good line. What should a priest do with so fair a house? A prison may beseem his holiness.
Mm-hmm. So Gaveston is very anti-papist.
Yeah.
Which now I'm going to come on to Isabella.
Yeah.
Because do you know why the name Isabella is relevant?
Why?
Do you know who Catherine of Aragon's mother was?
Ah.
Oh. I could tell that, Isabella was a Catherine of Aragon insert.
Yeah. She's also Spanish now.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Catherine of Aragon is Spanish, Isabella is French.
Yeah. But it's European and Catholic is what they're getting at there.
Yeah, and not only Catholic, but a rival, a contemporarily rival of England, because this is, King Edward takes place during the 100 Years' War.
Yeah, but I mean, even Isabella, according to Edward, in the history of Edward II, she did turn against her husband, and there's a lot of that going on. And she did. And Isabella and Mortimer, were at it like a pair of rabbits.
Yeah.
So, or at least that's what we can gather.
Also, like another Catholic queen. Once again, we're this is end of the play, but she does end up getting consigned to the Tower.
Yeah. Which again, this is what I mean by you have to understand both the context of the history of the characters and the history of the play.
Yeah.
You can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also another reason why critically reading your media is a good thing, because I mean, I knew bits and pieces, but like a lot of what I'm coming out with is tangential learning that I dug up after reading Edward II.
Yeah.
Just because it like pushed a, hey, this kind of reminds me of Henry VIII. And then I looked into it.
And this is why having an education in history and literature is so important.
Yeah.
Because if you'd never heard of Henry VIII, you'd have totally missed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a very... It's one of those where you kind of... I cannot in good conscience say to anyone, that you can read any text from this era and not be in a position where you have to know the history of it.
Yeah.
I mean, you can try, but you'll miss a lot of it.
That though, once again, back to Faustus. That reminds me, it's like, I forget if it was during the stream or afterwards, you mentioned the course that I brushed through.
The Open University course on this text, yeah.
And the thing is, I picked up on all of the, like, all of the Protestant, references before that, because the Protestant Reformation was hammered into me growing up. The history of the Protestant Reformation. So I'm like, yeah, okay, it's Dr. Faustus is German, so the Protestant Reformation started in Germany with Martin Luther. So obviously he's going to be portrayed as something of a Protestant hero or anti-hero, at least.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot more is made, especially by modern scholars and modern academics, about the relationship between Edward and Gaveston.
Yeah.
Which is why I keep coming back to it, because that's where my interest started with it.
Yeah.
But the thing about it is, in this play, it tells you that they killed Gaveston.
Yeah.
It doesn't tell you how.
There's a reference to it.
There's a reference to it, but there's also, it doesn't tell you how they kill Edward. And yet, in a lot of performances of this, it's taken as given that they go the same way.
Yeah.
And trigger warning for anyone who, just take this trigger warning now, brace yourself.
Hold on, I have it's not exactly in, I do have a banner for trigger warnings.
Yeah, so it's very, traditionally, the way they dealt with known, quote, and I say this word, sodomites, homosexuals, was to heat up a poker, so a long piece of metal, usually iron, that was used to move around coals in fires and things. And these things can be anything up to 4 foot long.
Yeah.
Heat it up to red hot and insert it into the
rear.
the specific orifice that got the men into trouble in the first place, we will say.
Yeah. We will let this boil on society.
And Mortimer's knife man does make a reference to that, but it's more, when he's about to kill Edward.
And because of the heat, what happens is it essentially cauterizes the insides as it goes. But this poker would become, there are some stories where they would push it so far it would come out the mouth.
Oh.
So, think of pig on a stick.
Pig on a stick.
Yeah.
It'd also take a while to kill them like that.
It's not an easy death, because the way it's done, it misses all the major organs. And because it
apart from the esophagus and the intestines.
Yeah. But when I say major organs, I mean organs that the body relies on to live. So you could very much have had this done to you and still be alive at the end of it.
Well, they probably survived for days. It was probably septicemia or something like that killed them, not the actual poker.
Yeah, very much
because
like
they wouldn't bleed. It'd be infection.
Yeah, very much like being left out on a pike.
Yep.
Like this was not an
Although
easy
no,
death.
you'd still bleed on a pike when they did this because it cauterizes it. There's no bleeding out. So it would be the infection that comes after.
It is the worst. It is one of the. It's up there with crucifixion.
Yeah.
It's
because
not a nice
crucifixion, you don't die from bleeding or anything like that. You drown.
Technically you suffocate. Yeah.
Anyways, back to Henry VIII.
So, but just because with this, doing that to a king, because it's not just the pain of it and the horror of it, it's also the baggage of what it implies about the person it's done to.
Yeah.
This was only done very much like crucifixion in ancient Rome. It was only done to the lowest of the law. So to do it to a king or a king's advisor is a big no-no.
And
is that the reason why in Dad's army thingy always said they don't like it up him?
But
sorry.
Yeah, I did give a trigger warning, Sammy. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. But and while the Mortimer's knife man does make a reference to it, in the play, Edward's actually killed by being stomped under a table.
In the play, it's actually quite it's left open to interpretation.
The version I read specifically says in the stage directions that they pin him under a table and stomp on it until he's dead.
Yeah, there's a lot of performances of this play that pin him under the table, face down, and also use the poker.
Yeah. But back to Henry VIII.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is a very Henry VIII-esque soliloquy that Edward has after he's been forced to banish Gaveston. How fast they run to banish him I love. They would not stir were it to do me good. Why should a king be subject to a priest? Proud Rome that hatches such imperial grooms. With these thy superstitious taper lights, wherein thy anti-Christian churches blaze. I'll fire thy crazed buildings and enforce the paper towels to kiss the lowly ground. With slaughtered priests make the Tiber's channel swell, and banks raised higher with their sepulchres. As for their peers that back the clergy thus, if I be king, not one of them shall live.
Yeah, that's pure Henry and Cromwell, that, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just yeah.
Yeah.
That's more Cromwell than Henry, I think.
Yeah.
But it's there and it's bitter.
Well, I mean the why should a king
answer to a priest? Yeah.
Yeah, that is Henry.
Pure Henry.
Yeah.
And it's the divine right of kings rearing its ugly head again.
Yeah.
For those who aren't aware, the divine right of kings is the concept that the reason the royal family and the royal line was so important is because the bloodline was blessed. The bloodline was ordained by God. And in a highly superstitious, highly religious environment, that matters.
Yeah.
So he's essentially saying, the Pope was elected by cardinals, but I was born to it. And therefore he's deeming himself more worthy of high office than the Pope.
Yeah.
And therefore not answerable to the Pope. Which I should point out is heresy.
Yeah.
is heresy under Catholic doctrine. Which, if you didn't know that already, go read a book about Henry VIII. But that's the entire point.
Yeah.
And again, it's another thing Edward would have questioned.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it was a big attitude amongst a lot of the English kings anyway. It was, why should the church have any rule saying what we do anyway?
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, in it, even nowadays, especially if you look at America, but more so in the time of the Renaissance, politics was religion, religion was politics.
Yeah, you couldn't have one without the other.
Yeah.
Because the only place people gathered reliably was the church every week. So guess what was coming out of the pulpits?
Yeah.
You know, that's how people got their news. It's how people find out what was going on in the world.
Yeah.
You know, the church bells rang out when something happened. The church was without the church, there was no civilization.
And of course, you know, whoever that, especially during the time of the Renaissance and the Protestant Reformation, whoever sat on the throne decided what religion you decided what church you go to.
Or decided whether your church had pretty things in it or whether it was all drab and boring.
Yeah. Oh, Protestants should start making cathedrals. Sorry, I couldn't resist.
It's a good job. I love you.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've done all this talking, and we're not even a quarter of the way through this play, really.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about Isabella.
Yeah. Okay. Isabella.
And I want to talk about, because we seem to be doing this thematically rather than chronologically, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
I want to talk about Isabella and her relationships, because we've touched on her relationship with Mortimer.
Yeah.
But what we need to, I think, look at is her relationship with Edward.
Yeah.
Because she is very good at playing the... She, more than anyone in this play, I think, is very much... very poorly represented.
Yeah.
She is represented as a bit of a marionette being tugged every which way. She wants Edward's love and she's willing to put up with Gaveston for it. But she's got Mortimer over here and she's...
Yeah.
But when you look at how Isabella behaves, that does not stand up to scrutiny.
Yeah.
The way she presents herself and the way she is are two different things, and she's a very interesting character for that.
Yeah.
The rest of the characters are largely very honest in this play. What you see is what you get. Isabella is...
Meanwhile, she's very much, you know, making... She's very much using emotional blackmail all the time.
Yeah. And she's very much presented as the... she's a little bit... She's the... She uses sexuality a lot in a way that even Gaveston doesn't.
Yeah.
And I do feel like she and Gaveston are two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, essentially foils for each other.
Yeah.
Even though they don't directly come into conflict in the play.
Yeah. And I mean, she doesn't... her complaints, I'm not surprised they fall on deaf ears. Because historically, a queen's role was to bear legitimate heirs and be quiet.
Yeah.
She knew what she was signing up for. This was her culture. She knew exactly what she was getting into with Edward. Though she'll deny it. So, why was she... She had 4 children to Edward. He'd done his duty by her.
Yeah.
She had no damn right to complain.
Yeah, because it was all duty then. I mean, the Queen's role was purely to give out the. I mean, it's fucking sexist as all hell, but that was the Queen's role. She had to give birth to the heirs, and
the king don't want none unless you bear sons, hun.
Yeah, pretty much.
Basically.
And Henry wasn't the first king to put a wife to death because she didn't bear sons.
Yeah, no, he wasn't the first. And I think had history gone a little bit different, it wouldn't have been the last.
Oh, no.
But she, even going so far, she compares herself to Juno. Now, I'm sorry. Edward is a bit of a cat. He's a bit of a prick. Yeah. And he's not the best husband, but he's not on the same level as Jove.
Yeah.
Can I just... Okay? No. Sweetheart, no. Okay.
Like, he may be a bit of a himbo, but he as far as the play's concerned, he only has eyes for Gaveston.
Yeah, exactly. So to compare herself to Juno is a bit because there's this line she comes out with: "For never doted Jove on Ganymede so much as he on cursed Gaveston."
Yeah.
So she's claiming that she's in a worse situation than Juno. And for those who aren't familiar, just to roughly translate that, she's basically saying that she'd rather be married to Zeus in all his fuckboy glory than be married to Edward. Which is a bit of a stretch, love.
Well, at least Edward's only doing it nasty with one other person.
Exactly. And it's not like she didn't have her bit on the side.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she's still got all the benefits of being queen, so...
Yeah. She's got all the benefits of being queen, and all she's being asked to do is to look the other way.
Yeah.
I mean, she's basically Melania.
Oh.
I would, in truth, probably say Melania has it worse.
Yeah, I would too, actually.
Because, I mean, at least Edward is vaguely seems to be
human?
pretty to look at across the dinner table.
He certainly doesn't wear orange rug.
Edward is a bit of a git. He's not a deplorable git.
No, he's not. He does rub it in her face with Gaveston a bit.
Yeah. Although in his era, he probably did grab people by their genitals.
So, I don't know, because, I mean, Edward and Gaveston, reads to me as cutesy couple PDA, not as, specifically out to spite her.
Yeah, no, but you can see why, if you're the person he's cheating on, it comes across as that way.
I mean, to be all honesty, with the way Gaveston was and the way Edward was, they probably would have been quite happy with a threesome.
Doesn't Gaveston suggest that at one point?
Yeah, I think it is suggested at one point.
I think there's one point where he actually suggests
the royal bed is large enough or something along those lines.
Yeah, the royal bed is large enough for 3.
Yeah.
And it's kind of... yeah, Hillary's the more current analogy there, Sammy, although Hillary too. Gaveston is very bohemian. He's very... He is the satyr of the play.
Yeah.
That's the point. He's the satyr. He's driven purely by pleasure.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want anything else. And it's the fact that no one else around him can see that. Just let him have his little pleasure and his little bits of fun. And he'll be fine.
And he'll do what everybody else needs. You know, he's going to be there for the kingdom.
Yeah.
As long as he gets to come, kingdom come.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I know a lot of it is it's very sexist in the way it's written. But as much as I like Gaveston, I dislike Isabella.
Yeah.
Because regardless of anything else with Gaveston, and this is something that I find with a lot of fictional characters that immediately I can't say what you want about Gaveston. He's loyal.
Yeah.
To the death, he is loyal.
Literally to the death.
Yeah, literally to the death. Whereas Isabella, she's just not.
Oh, she probably would have shoved the poker in if she'd been given the chance.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
as well.
Yeah, Sammy. Oof. Yeah, Sammy Jenkins. It's surprising how in some ways how progressive an Elizabethan play is.
Doesn't Chaucer talk about the red hot pokers in one of his? Yeah, I thought so. I mean, if you could get anything depraved, it's going to come up in Chaucer.
Let's just in general here. Let's be honest. The Victorians and their prudishness have a fuck ton to answer for.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
They are the cause of 90% of the homophobia, prudishness, sexual repression in the world.
Oh, all of it. I mean, there wasn't that before. I mean, there were definitely some churchy influences of, you can do these things, but if we find out about it, we're going to do horrible things to you. But there would have been a lot more progressive. Yeah, people look the other way. There would have been a lot more progressiveness in the long term had the Victorian area not decided to crawl up its own butt and decide to outlaw everything.
I think a lot of it as well is definitely the switch from Catholicism to Protestantism. Because Catholicism, I mean, I was raised in Catholicism, and there was always this attitude of just don't get caught.
Yeah. Don't ask, don't tell is very much the Catholic way.
The thing with Catholicism is it doesn't matter what you do because you can always just confess to it later and do your penance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas Puritanism and Protestantism, there's no confession, so there's no movement onwards. And so I think it definitely started in and around Cromwell. Cromwell has a lot to answer for.
Yeah.
But the Victorians, especially on topics of sex and sexuality, really took that to extremes.
Yeah. So, question. What was it, the Protestantism or was it the mummy dust?
Why not both?
Both is good.
Both is good.
Yeah. So let that be a warning to you. Do not snort mummy dust. It will turn you into a prude.
Yep, and don't shove red hot pokers up your butt because you might die.
Wait. One of those things is not like the others. Also, just ring correlation does not equal causation. I don't think the mummies had a lot to do with it. I think the mummies were more of a symptom than a cause.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Victorians did some weird things, didn't they?
Yeah.
Very.
I mean, they actually harvested blood from dead corpses because they thought that injecting themselves with other people's blood was going to make them younger and more vital. Yeah. They were basically practicing vampirism.
Yeah.
And they ate dust of genuine bona fide Egyptian mummies were ground up into dust and sprinkled on food.
Well, and snorted like cocaine. Yeah. Yeah, they also had mummy unwrapping parties.
Oh, yeah, they did
we still have those, to be fair.
No, as like casual social gathering.
Yeah, did you not see that thing in the news a couple of weeks ago?
Yeah.
We still have those.
Yeah. But at least they were trying to pretend to be academic about it.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the news, not the Victorian, let's unwrap the mummy, grind it into dust, and snort it like cocaine.
Yeah, but we're talking about the people who literally ate polonium-210.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because they thought it would make them young. Literally ate like uranium and stuff. Because
and then they had the jaws fall off.
Look, it's pretty and it glows, so it'll make my skin glowy.
Yeah, radium.
And then then his jaw fell off.
Died of a weird illness.
Yeah.
We don't see the correlation there.
No, well, they didn't. I mean, their concepts of medicine were pretty primitive.
So, some did, because when the radium girls started dropping off, it was noted in the court case that none of the management would even touch the radium.
So
it was the same.
They just didn't care.
Yeah.
The radium girls weren't the same as the ones who were painting, though. Who were painting
Yeah, they were.
Are you sure? Because wasn't there?
Because
what was the other one?
Yeah, working in those factories where they were painting the watches was the supposed health benefits of radium was seen as a perk, even though the pay was less than the other places, it was seen as a desirable job because you get the health benefits of the free exposure to the radium.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. They were the radium girls. What was the other one? There was a previous one prior to the radium girls with another thing like that.
Probably.
But they also had problems. Yeah, there's been a whole heap of things like that where workers were exposed. Well, it still happens where workers are exposed to ridiculous things that are going to kill them.
I mean, arsenic or in shipyards.
Asbestos, even, but it's a more modern one.
Well, heck, recently, I say recently, but the case took place in the mid aughts, and I mean the mid 20-aughts, where Libby, like a bunch of miners in Libby, had mesothelioma from working in an asbestos mine, and there was this big lawsuit for them trying to get health benefits.
Yeah, I mean, you've got asbestos, you've got Vietnam veterans and Agent Orange, you've got Iraq veterans and white phosphorus going on, you've got heavy metal mining in African nations, even diamond mining, and you've got gold mining and just anything to do with mining. You're going to be exposed to nasty stuff. And
what a wonderful tangent we've gone down.
But tangents.
Yeah.
But
could I bring up Thomas Midgley then? Thomas Midgley is the guy who put lead into fuel.
Because Isabel is very much a would-be manipulator.
Yeah, she's a bit of a Lilith character, isn't she?
Yeah. Because, she does essentially emotionally blackmail everyone. I mean, they were going to do what they were going to do anyways. It just gave them a little extra oomph to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But, well, except, of course, at the end when she tries it on her son and then ends up in the tower.
And it backfires.
Yeah.
Because what she doesn't realize is her son's grown up watching her.
Yeah.
He already knows the tricks.
Yeah.
So.
We have sidetracked so much in this.
We've done Isabella, we've done that, we've done Edward. I think that's pretty much most of it.
Yeah.
I will say there is this tendency in sort of the wider LGBTQ community to take Edward II as this tragic love story, and as some kind of, and to use it as a kind of gotcha against bigots, to say, well, the thing is that discounts a lot of the nuance we've discussed today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This
Yeah,
is
no, it is.
first and foremost. It's Oliver Twist running off with the princess. It's not.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, in some aspects, it's more a play about Henry VIII than it is about Edward II.
You could even argue it's about James III.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's more a play about court rivalries and politics than anything else.
Yeah.
Regardless of whichever monarch
insert best monarch here.
Yeah, insert your monarch here, basically.
Yeah.
Which is
I mean, in actual fact, the gay relationship between Edward and Gaveston is more a side avenue to bring Gaveston in and have his Saki relief to what's going on and have something aside from the normal politics. It's a good way of having that aside while still driving the story through the that love affair and everything. So, the
fact that Gaveston's a bloke is largely incidental to the plot.
Gaveston could be, Gaveston could be a woman and impact the plot in the same way.
Listen, if what Edward II is to me is what happens when a king doesn't have the kind of wherewithal Henry VIII had.
Yeah.
Because Gaveston could be Anne Boleyn, and Isabella could be Catherine, and Edward could be Henry. If only Henry hadn't been so strong and charismatic in his younger years and so willing to go up against the Pope.
Yeah. Imagine if Edward had been, though, at the time. Because that would have been a very different England after.
Yeah.
It
would have been. Particularly in Gaveston as well.
Yeah.
With it being Gaveston as well. I mean, think of that upper echelon prejudice that comes down to LGBT folk now. That would have been completely destroyed by Edward had he had the wherewithal to fight that and overthrow the church's ideas.
Destroyed? I don't think it would have been completely destroyed because you would have still had the influence of the church.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would. Yes, but it would have been a very different church. Sorry.
Not if Edward hadn't gone so far as to create a Church of England.
Yeah.
Because I don't think Edward would have gone that far. Because I don't think he was. Edward didn't have a Cromwell. Dispenser was not Cromwell.
Also, Edward did the grip of the Catholic Church in the time of the Tudors was already slipping on Europe because of the Protestant Reformation. Edward was still during the time of the Crusades.
But I'm just saying, if Edward had the wherewithal and the ability and the want to do what Henry did, that would have been.
But I do think contextually, Edward wouldn't have stood a chance.
Yeah.
I think they would have killed him anyway. They would have just killed him. Had it been Henry, though, who'd had a gay relationship and fought it off,
that would have been a very different England.
That would have been a very different England.
Yeah, because look at France under the Golden King, the Golden Louis, the Sun King Louis.
Well, his own brother.
Yeah, yeah, because his brother was gay. It was a much more liberal and progressive place. Like, for instance, Julie Daub or Julie Daub.
Oh wow! Yes,
and she wouldn't have been. Yeah, she wouldn't have been able to have her career or anything like it.
That Dabney? It was a Dabney.
Yeah,
Julie.
Yeah, Julie Dabney.
The sword wielding woman. Bisexual. What she
under the trans umbrella, sword wielding woman, bisexual.
I just love the way that when she saved her lover from the nunnery. That is a brilliant story. That whole thing of bringing a corpse in, setting fire to the room, and then escaping so that they think that she's died. This is a movie you want to see.
Yeah, she wouldn't have been able to lead the life she did under any other regime in in history, essentially.
She had to flee Paris twice, and neither of those were for
European
gay
regime
relationships.
in history. Any other European regime in history, I will.
No,
I think we should say modern history.
Yeah,
and by modern history, I mean post-Roman Empire history.
Yeah.
But yeah, she had to flee Paris twice, neither for being in lesbian relationships. Both times it was for dueling.
Yeah.
Because dueling was technically against the law at the time, and she won all her duels.
I feel like she would have got on very well with Caravaggio.
Oh, probably, yeah. And Joan of
another
Arc.
one who had to flee cities regularly for dueling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And another a very well-known LGBT character, person. Renaissance artists.
Yeah.
What can you do?
I so want a movie of Julie's life. I think it'd be absolutely brilliant. But she died really young, and she died in a nunnery because she went and joined one.
Well, the thing is with Renaissance characters as well, there's a reason it's called the Renaissance. They idolized the classics, the ancient Romans and the ancient Greeks. So to think that Renaissance people would have had any issue whatsoever with LGBT community.
No, they didn't.
To think that they would have cared about people being trans, it boggles the mind, especially. And when I talk about these characters, I'm talking about the elites who were actually educated at this time and who were part of the Renaissance movement. Within that community, I would argue that community as it stood was more progressive than pretty much any modern day country area you want to mention, except maybe certain parts of like San Francisco in the 80s.
Yeah.
It was.
I mean, I find it's getting a lot better with its progressiveness, but there are still those upper elements that do not want progression, do not want social change, and it's fucking frustrating.
I think the problem is that those elements don't realize that it's not progress. It's just they want to live in a world of their own design.
They want to live in the 60s.
Yeah, but even in the 60s, it was a
progression.
don't tell kind of thing. It was,
well,
I
think a lot of them would still be happy with the don't ask, don't tell. It's the fact that nowadays it's a case of Falcon shout it from the rooftops because you're not going to push people out of the way and not let them have rights anymore. And that's the bit that they object to. We don't want. We don't like knowing that you exist. That's what it comes down to. Especially for the religious. It's like, no, don't tell us you exist. We can't know that.
Yeah, like I've said before.
It's plausible deniability.
Like I've said before, when you complain that a piece of media is, quote, too political because it features characters of a specific minority, you're politicizing the very existence of that minority, which gets a bit
if you can say the words, this is political because it has X, Y, and Z in it, I'm sorry, but you are speaking from a privileged position whereby you have never considered your own situation to be political. Human existence, regardless of who you are, is political.
Yeah.
If you don't recognize that, it's because you've never been in a position where you've been forced to recognize that.
And once
that
again,
is an incredibly privileged position to stand in.
And also kind of
it's ignorant as well, because it means you haven't paid attention.
Yeah.
It goes back to that see no evil, speak no evil, hear no evil crap.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And, kind of harkens back to the regime that shall not be named.
Yeah.
hence the yeah.
Oh dear.
But,
have we mostly covered this now?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Because we've gone on. We've really sidetracked this end bit.
Yeah. Yeah, we actually kind of blew through Edward II.
Yeah. I mean, I think the reason we've blown through it is because we all agree on most of the points.
Yeah.
And we haven't really debated.
Well, yeah. But yeah, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again. All media is political because media is how we communicate our ideas, and ideas are the building blocks of politics.
Yeah.
I will say as well, we've spent a lot of time talking about Henry VIII.
Yeah.
But this one is also, there's a lot of references in there to John.
Yeah.
As well. King John. And the way the nobles play him like a fiddle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's one of those where it kind of shows we have a culture in Britain of being we're very positive about when nobles put a king in his place. This is the one example where it shows the other side of that.
Yeah.
How it can go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an interesting take for that reason as well.
Though, I will point out one last thing. There is another interesting Marlowism in Edward II, and I'll have to see I'll have to read Tamburlaine to see if it's an actual Marlowism, but where the decline of a life is compared with the waning of the day.
I think that's just another literary trope.
Yeah,
literary trait from the era, I think.
But from what I've read, Marlowe really likes it.
Yeah. Marlowe likes it. And Shakespeare is a bit ambivalent. John
Isn't Shakespeare ambivalent with everything, though?
Yeah. Shakespeare doesn't know what he stands for. That's why he writes so much. John Donne is very good at his days as lives. So is Ben Jonson.
But yeah, because in Dr. Faustus, you have the midnight, the leading up to midnight soliloquy. And then in Edward II, which actually isn't at the end of the play, but it's kind of near it, when he's about to give up his crown, he has his soliloquy talking about how the sun is setting and how his reign is coming to an end.
Yeah.
And he's waffling over whether or not he should actually give up his crown.
Yeah.
And that's probably a mistake.
Yeah.
I kind of feel sorry for Edward because he clearly didn't have the education.
Yeah.
And he hadn't been primed to be king. When you're the fourth child, you don't expect to suddenly be head of the family. So it's... And this happens a lot. This is the tragedy of the spare in the history of monarchies all over the world.
Yeah.
And British history in particular is very much a history of barely educated people thrust into a job they never wanted.
Yeah.
He would have been better off abdicating from the beginning and letting the country figure it out for themselves.
Except that there was no one to take his place.
Yeah.
He was the last chance. He had to wait for... I think had he lived a bit longer and had his son made it to a little bit more and got a few military victories under his belt, he would have abdicated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he didn't want to be king. You can tell that through his behaviour. And I think he would have got to the point where he'd have just said, well, yeah, my son's ready.
Yeah.
Just leave me. Leave me to run off into the sunset with my boyfriend here. You take the keys. That's what would have happened there. But second sons and spare kings get a bad flack in English history.
Yeah.
Because, and if there's one thing to take from that is educate all of your children.
Yeah.
But their fear was one of the younger ones would top the older one just so they could get the job.
Yeah, so and a lot of it was they got the same theoretical education, but they didn't learn the practical applications in the same way the eldest would.
Yeah.
So Edward would have learned to ride, to hunt, to, his courtly etiquette and all the rest of it, and his history and his Latin and everything like that.
But not the practical application of it all.
He wouldn't have learned how to balance the books. He wouldn't have learned how to deal with politics.
Yeah.
And that's what he was missing. And that's what all the second sons throughout history are missing. Because if you teach them that, suddenly they're a viable contender for the throne.
Yeah.
And when we have two people who are a viable contender for the throne, it gets a little bit messy.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, a tiny bit.
Yeah.
I'm glad we've done this one because we've covered both of the Marlowe texts. I think the one takeaway from Marlowe, even more so than Shakespeare, is make sure you understand the context the play is based on and written in. And I keep coming back to it because it's so important. Can you imagine if we'd read this and we didn't know who Edward II was?
Yeah.
We didn't know that Marlowe was a contemporary of Shakespeare. We didn't know anything about the era.
Though, one thing, and once again, back to Faustus, like, it's interesting because when you look at it with a modern set of eyes, without, just from a, as a modern reader, Faustus is actually the character is remarkably prescient, and he's right in everything he argues against Mephistopheles about.
Yeah, he's very, and this is something Marlowe's good at as well. He's very good at putting in certain facts into the mouths of his characters.
Yeah.
In a way that doesn't come across as preachy.
Yeah.
Which some more modern day authors could do to learn from.
Are we talking
channel
about the
punching bag?
We are talking about the channel punching bag.
Channel punching bag.
She really is dreadful, though, isn't she?
Have you seen the latest one?
Yeah, I've read the excerpts and I've seen people's reviews of it, and I have no interest in reading it. But she is just.
I am currently reading Tom Harris. Now, Tom Harris had the excuse of his time.
Yeah.
She just doesn't.
She has no excuse for what she did. I mean, she's peddling a trope from the 70s and 80s that we know isn't true to put to apparently have a story, to have a good story. But underlying that is all her transphobia. So fuck off.
Oh.
Yeah, and I do notice as well, all her transphobia on Twitter started around the time she would have started writing this book. And it makes me wonder if it's not just a really protracted sales pitch.
No, she's been doing the transphobia for a while, but she intensified it as the book came closer and closer to fruition. So yes, I think you could be right. She was looking for a bargaining chip on the book.
Or maybe half sales pitch, half mask off.
Yeah, a bit of both, probably.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got to be a bit of a bigot to actually want to do that in the first place. So So, but definitely she was looking for a market.
Yeah.
And she was looking for friendly ears, and she was looking for... What annoys me more is the older established actors and writers and that who have fucking no idea what they're talking about, lending their support. And it's quite obvious that they're dumb as all shit over it. They've got no idea.
Then she's had big names who've appeared in
and turned it down as well.
Especially in the Potter franchise, the big names who were big names before the Potter franchise.
Oh yeah, like Radimir and fuck off.
Yeah. Professor Sprout, I can't remember her name. Yeah. She came out with it straight away and said, "Do one." I adore her. She's fantastic. She's amazing.
Yeah, I can't remember what her name is.
The younger generation who were made by that franchise. And
all of them stood up
about that younger generation have really cottoned on to the fact that they've got a platform and they're using it for all the right reasons.
Yeah,
I mean I think it was expected from Emma Watson because she's always been vocal and everyone knew she was going to say something, and she was the first to say something. The speed at which Daniel Radcliffe came out and support too was amazing. I wasn't expecting that. I was possibly expecting him to say something, but the speed at which he did it was like, no, fuck that.
Well, and then even out of politics a lot, and so's Rupert Grint. So I wasn't expecting them to say anything. I was expecting them to just sort of.
Well, Rupert Grint has sort of not been a face in anything really for a while, and he stood up and said his bit, and a lot of people from the franchise did.
Yeah, Jason Isaac. Stood up and said, this is... Yeah. But a lot of them did it in such a way, did you notice? Rather than coming out against her, they came out in favour of transgender people.
Yeah.
And it just so happened that the time...
My favourite interaction that she had was with Stephen King. Because where Stephen was tweeting... He tweeted something. JK made a statement about something, and Stephen's comment back was, "What on earth are you talking about? I don't want to get involved in your politics," and because he's trying to be nice. And then she says something else, and Stephen goes, "Trans women are women. Fuck off," and she blocks him.
She really is. Also, speaking of, if there's anyone still listening, right, and you're in the Hannibal fandom, go show Brian Fuller some love. Because he's been getting it in the neck for the last fortnight from Anthony. He's been baited, he's been getting, all kinds of hell. And the guy is really stood up and he said, no, the fandom is the show.
Yeah.
And he's been totally pro-ship. And he's been accused of all sorts. He's been accused of being a paedophile, of being all kinds of things. Quick trigger warning, he's been suicide baited on Twitter. He's had it all. And he has stood up and he's basically said, no, this is an adult fandom for adults. And if you don't like it, don't look at it.
Yeah. Though, on Stephen King versus the channel punching bag.
That was fun. I love that.
I will say this. Both authors did do a stint writing under a pen name. Stephen King did it to prove to himself that it wasn't just his name selling books. That he could still cultivate a fan base just off his writing alone, and he proved it to himself.
Yeah.
The channel punching bag did it as a bigoted dog whistle.
Pretty much. Even down to the name she chose.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting how, talking about how Miss Channel Punching Bag, your gender, your birth sex is your gender, picked a male pen name.
Yeah.
Yeah, although maybe it says something about her psyche and why she's got a lot of self-hate.
I don't think she's definitely a TERF, but I think there's a lot of internalized misogyny there as well.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
No,
she's definitely got a lot of...
It does make me wonder if she's not so turfy because she's the one who's got a little bit of envy going on.
Oh, probably.
But anyways, I think we've well and truly reached the end of the stream, unless anyone has final thoughts on the actual topic at hand.
No, I think we covered it.
Had ridden off into the sunset and left his son to be king.
Yeah,
yeah, that would have been an awesome.
That should have been the story.
Yeah.
Stupid politics.
So let's go ahead and go on for shilling. I will shill something first. While Ilya Moon did reach her goal,
already?
Yeah, she reached it during the fundraiser yesterday.
Oh, good.
But as far as I know, the GoFundMe is still open. There's a link in the description. If you have the wherewithal, please donate.
Yep.
And we'll move to Jen. Jen?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, I don't know what I've got coming up. I'll probably have a couple of streams during the week, and at some point I will get a video recorded, but I think I'm heading down to Albany later on in the week, so as to how much of that I'll actually get done, I don't know. It's been like that at the moment. But yeah, there'll be something. I think that covers it.
A couple of things to shill from me. First off, Jeff and I should be picking up the Asterix and Obelix series we're doing next week. That should be on my channel. Now, I am saying should because I'm sure you appreciate we're both having a bit of a time of it at the moment, and it's not a great one to be doing. And we want to be in the right headspace to be able to treat it as it deserves.
Fair enough.
So there's a pin in it, but when it does go, it will be on my channel. So I will tweet out about it when we have a set time and date.
Yeah.
Also, as well, I don't know if he's still in the chat, but Jeff is a great bloke, just in general. So do show him some love because he's going through it right now as well.
Flood his Twitter with wholesomeness.
Yes, flood his Twitter with wholesomeness.
We love you, Jeff.
Do what Ring made people do to me last week when I suddenly woke up to a bunch of gifts.
Oh.
Did you think I wouldn't find out, husband? Do that to Jeff. Yeah. And other than that, I have a secondary Twitter now. I am at Discourse Noodle on Twitter, where I tweet fandom things, not safe for work things, and current obsession is Hannibal, if you haven't already noticed. Come and say hello. 18 plus only, no bigots, no antis. Just, not that I think any of you are bigots or antis, but dead dove do not eat.
Yeah. I'm an auntie.
Follow it, you don't have to, but if you do, enjoy.
And so eventually, if I have the energy / time to do so, I will be doing a Dungeons and Divinity on building Dr. Faustus in 5th edition. And of course, as always, there's secular D&D on Saturday and Media Musings on Sunday. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't have a topic for next week, but I think it should be something spooky because we are in the spooky season.
Ooh, so
I
what's
mean, I
a good
have just finished reading Red Dragon.
I'd have to go and read it.
No,
I haven't
I
read it yet. I've
wouldn't
seen
There's
them
an
have
in
enough
audiobook, Jen. I can send you the audiobook if you want.
I wouldn't have enough time.
even with the audiobook, it's several hours, isn't it?
Oh,
4 or
shall
5
we do
hours.
Grimm's Fairy Tales?
Oh yeah, that sounds like fun.
Yeah.
We
Or
could do Grimm's.
yeah, or we could talk Stephen King, or
We could talk Stephen King, considering we just did talk about Stephen King, and we could even cover movies as much as the books. So that would be interesting.
I mean, to be fair, I haven't watched a lot of Stephen King horrors. I prefer his more drama stuff.
Yeah,
I prefer the drama stuff too, but
mainly because there's so many jump scares in the horrors, and I'm just like, that's not necessary.
Yeah. The other thing to do would be we could do the
general, just a general discussion on horror.
We could do just a general. We could do a general discussion on horror authors.
Yeah,
that would, because we could do Stephen King. We could do. Mental blank. Why can I not remember her name?
Anne Rice.
Thank you.
Nah, you've got to be careful with Anne Rice because she might hit you with a takedown notice.
Oh,
I actually haven't read any Anne Rice. Well, actually, I think I might have. It was like a werewolf book, but it was weird.
Look, Anne Rice, does not like anything talked about. She's just so anti-fandom. It's unbelievable.
Yeah,
really.
Like, she used to hit fan fiction authors with takedown notices.
That's a shame.
I mean, I'm going back 15 years, but she used to hit fan fiction authors with takedown notices. Like, to the point where if you posted Anne Rice fanfiction on fanfiction.net, your account would get deleted.
Why don't we talk about a B-grade horror?
The thing is, I haven't really seen any horror movies.
Oh, okay, me either. But I've seen a few B-grade stuff, like.
Or we could also possibly talk Satanic Panic or Frankenstein or.
Yeah, actually, why don't we talk Frankenstein? But why don't we tie it into the historical writing of it with Mary Shelley and the mental house and everything? Because the actual story of Frankenstein, as in getting to it, is just as interesting as the book itself.
Hissy has an idea.
Literature?
What?
Sorry?
Gothic literature. Just in general, Gothic
literature.
Oh, yeah.
Gothic literature,
Wuthering Heights. I haven't read Bram Stoker's Dracula, but that would fall, and I'm fairly familiar with it.
I haven't read Bram Stoker's Dracula, but I'm familiar with it. So I've read Wuthering Heights and I've read Frankenstein. So, and I've seen Frankenstein movies,
and of course, we will
them.
be closing the month with War of the Worlds.
Of course.
Bam bam bow. Da da dun da da dun. That's my favorite version.
I need to read that.
I want to listen to the. I'm going to listen to the CDs. Actually, I might watch the DVD.
Well, also because we did talk about a text that is before the Mickey barrier. It is probably on Project Gutenberg, which you can go to Gutenberg.org. And Gutenberg.org has a collection of public domain works that are for free distribution as ebooks. Hashtag not sponsored, but I will shill them till my death.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
My brain's just farted on me. What book were we just talking about?
Edward II? Or are we now talking about Frankenstein?
We're going to do for next week.
Yeah,
Frankenstein, Bram Stoker's Dracula, and Wuthering Heights. Any of that gothic.
Gothic horror.
Although I don't know that Wuthering Heights really classes as
Wuthering Heights
horror.
is gothic.
It's definitely gothic, but I don't know that counts as horror.
Ooh. The Jeff Wayne version of War of the Worlds, the musical drama, is on Audible.
Oh,
awesome! It is worth listening to. It's worth seeing the movie as well. The movie stage show version of it.
And a tease for the end of the month. I will be dusting off my Richard Burton impression.
Cool. Nobody would have believed.
No one would have believed.
Oh, you do that so well.
Yeah.
Bum, bum, bum. Sorry, the music's stuck in my head now.
with the shilling out of the way and a pin put in next week, we'll go ahead and go with taglines.
Cool. Take care, be good, and as always, if you can't be good, be careful.
And remember, indoctrination is a hell of a selfie stick, so don't choke on it.
You nearly did.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.